This shall be an everlasting statute unto you. The Ten Commandments and Mosaic Law, about 1300 BC to the 6th century BC. In context, focus, divine law. Circa 1750 BC, King Hammurabi of Babylon writes a law code. After, circa 1207 BC, an inscription on granite by Pharaoh Merneptah of Egypt is the first reference to Israelites in Canaan and boasts that Israel is laid waste. 3rd century BC, the Torah is translated into Greek entitled Pentateuch, or 5 books. Circa 200 CE, rabbis in Palestine compile a written code of Jewish oral traditions, the Mishnah, which offers further guidance on interpreting the laws in the Torah. Circa 350 to 550 CE, scholars published the Gemara, an analysis and elucidation of the Mishnah. The two works form the Talmud. Mosaic law is an ancient legal system set out in the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible known to Christians as the Old Testament. The Torah, or instruction, contains a great number of laws which are presented as given directly by God to Moses, founder and lawgiver of the Jewish nation. In the legend of the Exodus, as described in the Torah, Moses was ordered by God in 1300 BC to lead the Israelites out of enslavement in Egypt and take them to the promised land of Canaan. Moses led his people first to Mount Sinai, which he climbed, and there God gave him the 10 Commandments, as well as many detailed laws covering moral behavior, religious worship, and every part of daily life. The most important commandment was the first. You shall have no other gods before me. The Israelites spent another 40 years in the desert before Canaan, and Moses himself died within sight of it. Mosaic law was perceived as part of a covenant, a formal agreement between God and the Israelites. It was believed that God promised to protect the Israelites and give them the land of Canaan if they obeyed his laws. According to the book of Exodus, chapter 9, verse 5, God said, "Now, if you will obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations will you be my treasured possession." The 17th century painting seen here by French portrait Philippe de Champagne, entitled Moses with the 10 Commandments, shows the inscriptions of 2 tablets of stone on 2 tablets of stone. Authors of the Torah. The books of the Torah, written in Hebrew, were thought to have been set down by Moses himself, but from the 18th century, scholars developed a historical approach to reading the Bible, which appeared to show that the stories had been shaped over time by many authors using different vocabulary and styles. The text includes footnotes inserted by later generations to explain ancient place names and point out evidence for events still visible to this very day, quote unquote. Scholars in 19th century Germany identified 4 types of source material in the Torah. They were termed E, J, D, and P: Elohist, Jahwist, Deuteronomist, and Priestly, with the earliest material, most of Genesis, much of Exodus, and some elements of Numbers, thought to come from E and J. Source E describes the traditions of the northern tribes and refers to God by the title Elohim. Source J pertains mainly to the southern Israelite tribe of Judah and refers to God by the 4-letter name Yahweh. YHWH is soon to be pronounced Yahweh. The book of Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Torah, is attributed to Source D. It is associated with the religious reformation of King Josiah, who ruled the Israelite kingdom of Judah, formed after the northern and southern tribes divided in 930 BC in the 7th century BC. Josiah centralized Jewish worship in the temple in Jerusalem and formed strict monotheism. The northern kingdom, Israel, had been conquered by the Assyrians in 722 BC, and in Deuteronomy, the history of Israel is written as proceed from Judah. The latest material from Source P dates from after the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the city and the temple of Jerusalem in 586 BC. He deported the Jewish leaders, including the priests, to Babylon, and there the priests revised the book of Genesis and Exodus and wrote Leviticus and Numbers. In the priestly stories, Yahweh was not tied to one place, but it could accompany the Jews anywhere, including their exile. "I will put my dwelling place among you. I will walk among you and be your God, and you will be my people. The book of Leviticus, chapter 16, verse 11 and 12. Mosaic law evolved over time, being updated in response to new circumstances, yet every new law was presented as having been given to Moses by God at Sinai. One transcendent God. The early Israelites worshipped other Canaanite gods alongside Yahweh. In the Torah, there are many stories of Israelites worshipping Baal, god of rain and fertility, and Asherah, the mother goddess. Yahweh and the other gods were worshipped as sanctuaries, holy places, located on hilltops often. The first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me, could be read to mean that other deities may be worshipped as long as Yahweh is honored above them. In the stories attributed to sources J and E, Yahweh appeared in human form walking in the garden in the cool of the day, the book of Genesis chapter 3 verse 8, or visiting Abraham in front of his tent, the book of Genesis chapter 18. However, by the time Deuteronomy was written, God was transcendent, existing beyond the created world, and Judaism was a monotheistic religion. King Josiah, in the course of his religious reformation, removed the Asherah statues from the temple in Jerusalem, burned them, and destroyed all the hilltop shrines. Once Judaism became monotheistic, the earlier stories of Israelites worshipping Asherah and Baal were interpreted as examples of regression from Mosaic law. The Babylonian exile was now seen as divine punishment for this. A nation of priests. During their exile in Babylon, the Jewish priests asserted that God had commanded the Israelites to be a holy people, a nation of priests, so that he could live among them. They were instructed to keep themselves separate from their Babylonian neighbors by observing strict rules of diet and cleanliness. The Hebrew word kadosh, translated as holy, literally means separate. It was common in the ancient world for priests to observe rules of purity. Egyptian priests, for example, had to bathe in cold water 4 times a day and wear papyrus sandals and linen rather than leather or wool. The idea that a whole nation should follow such laws was unique. The Jewish rules and rituals are described in detail. The book of Leviticus, chapter 11, verse 47, commands the people to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, between living creatures that may be eaten and those that may not be eaten. Pork, shellfish, and many other foods were forbidden. Those animals that were permitted could be eaten only if they were ritually slaughtered and the blood removed. According to the book of Leviticus, chapter 11, verse 39, if an animal that you are allowed to eat dies, anyone who touches its carcass will be unclean until evening. Again, the book of Leviticus, chapter 14, verse 48 through 53, describes an elaborate ceremony to purify a house with mold on the walls. A priest should take cedarwood, scarlet yarn, hyssop, and a live bird, dip them into the blood of the sacrificed bird and some fresh water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. Then he is to release the live bird in the open fields and outside the town. In this way he will make atonement for the house, and it will be clean. Speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, Be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. The book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 1 and 2. Absolute truth. Earlier ancient law codes, such as the Code of Hammurabi, were casuistic, describing procedure in particular cases from which general principles were derived. In contrast, the 10 Commandments were epodictic, absolute statements of right and wrong, such as, You shall not murder. Even so, the Mosaic Code included many laws that resembled Mesopotamian and Babylonian laws. For example, Law 251 in Hammurabi's Code states, If an ox be a goring ox, and it shows that he is a gorer, and the horns are not bound, or the ox is not fastened, the ox gore a freeborn man and kill him, the owner shall pay 1/2 a mina in money. The book of Exodus, chapter 21, verse 29 and 30, says that if a bull has had the habit of goring and the owner has been warned but has not kept it penned up and it kills a man or woman, the bull is to be stoned and its owners also to be put to death. However, the owner may redeem his life by the payment of whatever is demanded. Although Mesopotamian kings claimed to rule on behalf of gods, they never claimed that their gods themselves were the authors of the laws. To break a law was to commit an offense against a fellow human who might choose to pardon the offender, but breaking a law in the Torah was different. It was not just an offense against the fellow human, it was also a sin against God. The Torah Scroll. In the picture here, reading from the Torah Scroll is part of the ritual of Jewish prayers. It takes place on certain days, including Jewish holidays and the Sabbath. The scroll that contains the text of the Torah, including the laws given by God through Moses, is the most sacred object in every Jewish synagogue. Each scroll, or Sefer Torah, Sefer means book or written document, is handwritten on special parchment using a traditional quill or reed. The text contains 304,805 Hebrew letters, which have to be written perfectly by a trained scribe. A single mistake would invalidate the entire scroll. The scroll is kept in a richly ornamented cabinet called the Torah Ark. The holiest part of the synagogue and the focal point of prayer, this is built on the wall facing Jerusalem. Passages from the Torah scroll are read out in the synagogue usually several times a week. Selected sections are read every Sabbath morning, chosen so that the entire Torah is read over the course of a year. The end of this annual cycle is marked by the festival of Simchat Torah.